Hello, this is Ariana, and today I'll be going over my affinity map on Miro, and just kind of going over the healthcare um, plan and the three main research questions that I decided to focus on for this assignment. So, before going forward, I think it's important to note that the healthcare service, I guess you could say, that I've centered on was Planned Parenthood. And just kind of as a refresher and just to implement, the goal of Planned Parenthood is really to provide high quality, affordable, and inclusive sexual and reproductive healthcare services. And so, kind of for the way that I wanted to map out this affinity map, really was kind of propose an example and the implications of the three main research questions and then an underlying theme of all three. And so to begin, I kind of started off with an example of a stakeholder being a patient. So in this case, a woman seeking an annual or routine checkup. She's never had one, but she recently just received insurance. The relevancy of her never having one isn't particularly too important, but I just felt like it was important to add on in terms of adding a description, in terms of differentiating from a typical patient. And so, before starting forward, the three main research questions that I decided to focus on were just common services that patients seek to obtain, um, some potential barriers with accessing this care, and how this patient care relates to the overall satisfaction. And so, before on why I decided to focus on these three is because I feel like they all kind of combine together to demonstrate the efficiency and the overall success of what Planned Parenthood provides. And so, starting off, common services based off of the interviews that I had with the stakeholders, common examples being just gynecology visits, so pregnancy and birth control visits, fertility and planning services, and of course, one of the most popular ones, abortion services. So these are just kind of some of the main ones that were exemplified. And so, kind of pushing over here on how the services and the barriers are connected. So some one of the commonalities being that the services can essentially lead to potential barriers in accessibility, thus being abortion, the main and prime example of Planned Parenthood's um, barriers in terms of accessibility. Abortion, it's a historical, debatable issue that has led to a negative perception of Planned Parenthood, not necessarily by a large demographic, but I think some negative associations have become of Planned Parenthood and just an overall underlying kind of negative feel, you can say. And so, kind of pushing over here into the potential barriers with accessing care. So the main being obviously lack of insurance or coverage. Nowadays, there's a high percentage of uninsured individuals, and although healthcare is a human right, in my opinion, it's unfortunately not provided freely. And so, while Planned Parenthood does try to provide low cost care, at the end of the day, low cost can differ for everybody, and at times it is still inaccessible to certain individuals. So, lack of coverage and insurance definitely impacts accessing care. And so, limited to clinics and or transportation services, a lot of the times individuals don't necessarily have immediate access to cars or buses or a means of getting to a clinic. And nonetheless, there are certain demographics or certain places in which clinics are not instilled there and they're not established. And so, it just makes accessing services 10 times harder when you don't have a reachable distance or means of getting there. Um, Another important barrier that was mentioned in the interview was kind of the limited staff and resources. So then again, it makes accessing care just much more difficult because limited staff can then lead to higher wait times, lower lower response rates, and just lower like satisfaction in general. If you don't have a lot of resources, it just makes things such as like services being obtained kind of 10 times harder. So this can lead to decreased accessibility. And then finally, so I think one of the most important ones that was kind of notioned throughout all the interviews as one of the main barriers in terms of accessing care was just kind of the fear and judgment that may arise from receiving care from Planned Parenthood. A lot of the times when people go, it's kind of like a taboo thing to say. Not necessarily for everybody, and especially in liberal areas, but I would just say in more moderate and conservative areas, it's kind of a taboo idea of saying that you're going to go to Planned Parenthood because of the fact that it's centered solely on reproductive health. And while it is an innate and human thing, oftentimes people become uncomfortable at the idea of solely going to a sexually centered clinic. And so I kind of connected these two here because I think it's important how I mentioned how like certain services can lead to potential barriers. So such as one of the main being the fact that protesters and harassers who aren't Planned Parenthood are mainly there because of the fact that Planned Parenthood provides abortion. And so that was just one of the main connections that I was able to kind of come up with. And so, kind of going up here, we move over and we look at the intersection that you can go towards the third main research question. How does patient care relate to the overall satisfaction? So, a potential intersection between these two is that basically the barriers can cause the patients to feel either dissatisfied or satisfied with the care. And so, as I mentioned in the interview, I asked a particular question in terms of like, what is it that makes people feel satisfied or dissatisfied with a certain service or with the care that they received? And so we kind of go forward over here, and I just kind of mentioned some of the reasonings towards a dissatisfied service. Um, so basically, if they had an outcome that wasn't necessarily what they were looking for, or they just had a negative experience and kind of just repeating again, lack of services, high wait times, and lack of support can really affect an individual's overall experience in a negative way. While it's not the actual physicality of what is being done to them, but the environment that's created can cause individuals to just kind of reject the experience and make it really just like a bad taste in their mouth. So kind of pushing down here. So what is it that makes a satisfied service? So care that basically supports their needs. Uh, they feel like they had a positive outcome. They feel supported by staff. I think an important one I forgot to mention was just overall like accessibility once again. So it's just like if it was easy to navigate, if they didn't have high wait times, if they could talk to somebody readily in their language. I think that's really important to note. And so one of the main things that I was able to kind of just connect from the main three all together in this underlying theme is that they were all entirely connected. And so what I mentioned here is that in order to achieve success, underlying factors affecting primary stakeholders must be considered and properly treated or combated to ensure satisfaction and success. And so what this kind of means is just that the overall problem doesn't necessarily have to come directly from kind of like a first point of view or like first association of what may be happening, but rather like underlying factors that may be causing a larger issue at hand. So oftentimes we can say it's one issue, but in reality it's a minuscule or a mixture of a bunch of issues to create that. And so all of that combined, it can create and just overall cause dissatisfaction in certain cases. So in my affinity map, I really just wanted to go at it in a way in which I connected the three, no, I highlighted the big three ideas and just maybe some causes and just answering them and then connecting them in a way. So as I mentioned, so barriers, the barriers are most often caused by the services, satisfaction caused by either barriers and services. And so altogether, these three connected come together and kind of demonstrate the entire, can kind of dictate the entire experience that one may have while accessing services at Planned Parenthood. Thank you.